Well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to have a brief discussion on some of the fundamentals of real estate development, really just starting the process. My name is Ben Wieseman. I'm the Director of Catalytic Development here at REV Birmingham. And I'm going to kind of walk us through a short presentation and be taking questions and answers at the end. And we'll follow this up with additional information as we dive into this topic. As we start talking about real estate development, I do want to stress that it can be a complex project, but it can also be very simplistic at its core. And you're going to see that complexity play out. But at the end of the day, as we talk about places, real estate, buildings, infrastructure, we really want to make sure we focus that at the end of the day, real estate is all about people. And we're going to be dealing a lot, and you're going to see a lot of how we deal with people and how people play the largest role in real estate development. So let's start with why real estate. Location, location, location. The old phrase from the 40s still stands today. And as that phrase and as that ideology has moved through time, it changes into today's market. So now we have to look at a location in place, the physical context of the structure of the building, the location of the market. What's the supply and demand? Is there a need for a coffee shop? Is there a need for that new office? Is there, what are those needs in the marketplace today that we know of? And then, of course, location of the financial market. And as we're seeing current rates, the requirements, the lending agencies, the equity placements, but what's that financial market looking like today and the market we're going to be working in? As we know, we're seeing things happen in a cyclical pattern. They come and they go. And these financial markets change. So we need to know where we're at today. So we can kind of start with this very simplistic way to look at real estate as these three tenets: a location in place, the location in the market, and then where the financial market is, that location of time that we're working in. And that kind of jumps us off to that project we may be envisioning and thinking about. But we also have to look at real estate itself. We can see real estate in two different segments. One, it could just be a personal investment strategy for an individual, diversifying your portfolio, accepting tax benefits and cash flows. And on the other hand, development in real estate is a small business into itself. So we see that there are lots of different needs and how that small business functions. Sorry about that, I jumped for a moment. And so we have three primary roles that we're going to be talking about today. We need an owner, we need a tenant, and we need that end user, that customer. And if we keep those three roles in mind and what role we're playing, are we the owner, are we the tenant, or are we just that end user customer, and how these things begin to work together. So we've talked about kind of that overall, the location, 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 but now we're looking at these three roles, so how people begin to play into that. And this is its most simplistic format. We need that owner, we need that tenant, and of course, we need that customer, that user base. But there are going to be a lot of other people that come into play in real estate development. The developer, the tenant, the city council, the mayor, a designer, the engineer, the subcontractors. And so all of a sudden, we're growing the team, we're growing the number of people involved in a project, we're growing the need and that specialty of information. And so we end up with a lot about these relationships that we have to manage and understand. And that's what's critical. This is the people that begin to play these roles. So let's just look at the developer for a moment. The developer can take three general typical positions. One, we could be a fee developer. We are paid by an owner to acquire a piece of property and bring it to use. We could be the developer that's a merchant developer. We're acquiring the property ourselves for ourselves, and when we're going to redevelop it and ultimately sell that property. And we could be a developer that looks for the long-term hold. So we're going to acquire, develop, and then really utilize not only the tax benefits that come with real estate investment, but also those long-term cash flows as an investment position. So right off the gate, as the developer into the real estate deal, we have to decide what role we're going to play. And these can change project by project and can be very specific to where we're working and what local market. And we also have to begin to then look at, are we the equity or the debt provider? And we can take two different roles when we talk about that finance piece. We're going to talk more about. And then who we are. And this gets back to, are we an individual? Are we working for a corporation or part of the corporation? Are we the city? Are we a municipality that's doing development and incentivizing development? Are we a nonprofit? This is a role that I'm very common and understand how to play. And then you can also be the lending institution and the lender in a deal. So all of a sudden, the developer can not only take on different positions, have different needs and goals for their work, but also have different motives and a different framework for the company. That all begins to play into how we begin to develop and do the real estate project. But we don't want to stray from what we talked about earlier. It can be as simple as a location, location, location. Finding the right building, finding the right space, making sure we know the market, we know the need that's been said, that we're filling a need, and then we know and can connect to finance. And how do we pull that project together? And each of those projects in our local markets will be unique. They'll have their own set of needs based on what the building looks like or the space, who the tenant may be, and what they're going to do, and then the financing that's required to pull the deal together. And so that project, that unique local market, will drive the relationships that we have to pull into the deal to make it work. From city councilmen to lenders to operators to geotechs to designers, all of those relationships begin to play that role. No one person generally plays all three roles, and no one person has all that expertise in-house. So you have to start building your team. You have to start adding other people to this equation to pull these deals together. And that takes time. So part of that time, what does that process look like? Typically, and the way we start to define the real estate development process, we can look at it in about 14 different steps. And at every step along this process, there may be a different team member that has to provide expertise and or begin to understand what's going to come next. Generally, we have one individual, the developer, who's leading the project through this entire process. But that's not always the case. And that developer could also be an owner. The developer could also be the tenant. And so that developer could wear different hats and have different roles as we move through this process. Now, 14 steps is a lot, and we'll share those in a minute. But as we see, and as we talk about development, it's easy to imagine the process as a linear of do this, then you can do that, and then you can do the next thing. And the truth is, it doesn't work like that. It's not a linear process. It's not that straightforward. And it's not about checking boxes. We just talked about how many people we're pulling into a process, how many different variables we're trying to solve, and the timing it takes. So our process tends to feel like it's all over the place. We have highs, we have lows, we backtrack, we redo things, we bring new partners in. So this 14 steps can take a meandering, unique, special path to get that project across the finish line. But what are some of those steps? What do those kind of look like? So here's the 14 steps. And you can see they take you from coming up with a big idea, which is critical, right from number 1, all the way to number 14, disposing of the property. What's your exit strategy? Whether you're an individual owner or a business, whenever you go talk to lending agencies, whenever you're thinking about how you as an individual are going to utilize the property, you've got to start thinking about that exit strategy. And to know that from the beginning or have an idea will help guide you through the different stages of the development process. So we start with the big idea, and we start to understand how we're going to dispose of the property at the end of the project. But we have a lot of things to do. If we just look at the left-hand side of this graphic, we see 5 steps right off the top. creating a concept, testing the market, evaluating the site, constructing a pro forma, and preparing sources and use funds to talk to finance. We haven't even bought the project at this point. That doesn't happen until we get to step 6. And maybe then we have some ownership stake, or we're bringing the owner to the market. So there's a lot of work that happens before control is a lot of times at that point. But we're going to need control of the site, control of the property, or have that relationship with the owner to guarantee that control. And then we can move through the rest of the process about negotiating a tri-party agreement between the owner, the contractor, and the bank, and how the work comes together, and how do we construct the project, manage the project, and then once again at the very end, dispose. But you can see how much happens in the very beginning, how much happens in the middle, steps 6 through 11, before we even begin that construction, and all the different things we have to solve for and begin to learn about. And this is once again where we're bringing in multiple levels of expertise needed. We're bringing in multiple individuals into this process, and we bring time and requirements. And I think we'll start to understand that more and more, that one of those old adages in real estate development is time is money. And that is true on projects. How quickly an individual or the developer can move a project through these stages of the process. How many times they have to go back and rethink or redo or add more or develop it a different way. Those decisions, those issues all begin to affect the project and getting it to a completion. And so we have to be cognizant of all of those. But let's stay simple again, because that's the point of this part 1 here. Today was just that quick introduction. So we're talking again about understanding the location of the space, the market, and the finance. So for a lot of you on there, those are the first 3 things we want to start talking about, is let's identify that location. That's what we need to do, number 1. And for a lot of us, we know the place in our downtown. We know the place in our main street that has that special little building that has been vacant for a while, that is a perfect or could be a perfect site for a new tenant. So then let's identify that tenant. What's needed? What's in that supply and demand model? What is the community saying they want? Or what are you hearing that the market says is that they need? Does the community need a coffee shop? Does it need a new art studio? Does it need new office space? Does it need an employment center? What is that tenant, and how do they fit into this market? And I put on here a good operator is gold, and I can't stress that enough, that if you can help build and create good operators, or find good operators to come in and be those tenants, it makes the development process a lot easier in multiple ways. 1, you have somebody as a partner to go along the process with you because they want the space as a tenant. 2, a good operator is someone who's going to show up every day and be running their business. Therefore, you've got boots on the ground. You've got a relationship with someone who's in the building who can help identify issues before they become big issues that you can get handled. And 3rd, a lot of times when we talk about financing and how we begin to pull these projects together, that tenant and that tenant's needs will become part of the finance questions. And financiers will look to those good tenants, and they even begin to rate them differently. And they look at their credit, they look at their ability to pay back loans and their needs for their businesses. And so creditworthy tenants take a higher priority in these projects for some of these finance people. It's not to say the individual is right or wrong, the good or the services is right or wrong. It's not an opinion on those issues, but it is talking about, from a finance perspective, that tenant's ability to pay back and live up to the loan requirements of the development. Those become strong issues. Those all become that market consideration. A good operator can solve a lot of those issues along the way and be a long-term partner for the developer. And then lastly, we can't forget that finance bucket. And here we pull in a lot of different individuals. So the site that you've selected, the use of the tenant that you want to go in there, what are the needs of that site? Does the city have, as we heard from last week in Jason Fondren's session on zoning, is it properly zoned and entitled to allow the business to function the way we want it to? Do we have to help work with that? What are the needs of the finance, of the debt or the equity that's being involved? And what does that permitting need to make sure the work can get done? So a lot of time the developer begins to connect all three of these issues to make the project happen, from the space to the tenant to navigating the finance between the owner, the bank, and the city permitting. The simple as we can keep the equation, the quicker we can move through those 14 steps of the process. But at its core, real estate development is still about, and will be about for the near future, location, location, location. So yes, this was a really quick intro today. I appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to open it up for some general questions that I can answer, and we'll call it a quick lunch and learn. Collier, have you seen anything?
No, we don't have any questions at the moment.
All right. Well, as we move into our next set of questions for your town, as we move into our next set of lunch and learns for your town, we'll pick up the real estate development part and continue that equation into a deeper dive of what the developer needs and the finance needs for individual projects. And as we were talking about, these projects are all about local, and local means unique, they're authentic. And so every project is going to have its own set of needs and individuals to be involved. And sometimes there's no boilerplate that we can use to make sure that the coffee shop gets started or the ice cream parlor is up and running. We have to look at that individual building, the ownership. We need to look at that tenant and its business model and the community and how they're going to support it. And then, of course, that financing piece. But once the developer begins to solve all that, the process can really start to work. So start with that big idea and start thinking about those different roles and those different relationships that we're involving. Because once again, development is all about people. It's all about these relationships. As I leave you today, I want to make sure that everyone's aware that we have set our dates for our 2022 Your Town Workshop. Those will be April 27th through the 29th in 2022. On the website right now, if you go to the workshop, you can leave your name and an email address. And as soon as we have that page for people to apply for space and to register, we'll send that email out to everyone. But thank you all for your time today. This has been a good little session. Thank you.
All right.